Representative Susan Allen has a proposal that would essentially not allow licensed therapists to provide what is typically known as conversion therapy to those under the age of 18 in the state of Minnesota. She joins me now to talk about her bill. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Representative, let's begin with what precipitated you taking on this bill at this time, this issue?
I think it's something that's always been a concern, and so we focused obviously on the marriage bill. And then the amendment, constitutional amendment before that. So it's something that at the same time we're focusing on anti-bullying and bringing forth that legislation. So it's a lot to take on, but there are some really some advocates that are really have been working on this for a while.
And let's clarify what conversion therapy is for viewers who might not know.
Some may have used the term reparative therapy, or it's basically to attempts to change a person's sexual orientation, and so it's usually done it may be done in some religious organizations that they have spiritual counseling, but it's often surprisingly done. It's still very prevalent among those that are licensed psychologists, nursing board. So there's some mental health practitioners that are still engaging in this type of therapy. So.
How common of a practice is it, particularly for minors?
I think Out Front has done a good job of identifying some of the organizations. And if you look at over the period of the last 5 years, they've sort of changed the way they advertise their services. So it's not as obvious anymore that some of the Christian sort of based mental health services that offer this type of therapy. It's just sort of given that it's part of their family therapy. So it is prevalent, and it's a nationwide problem. So,
what would your bill do if it is passed?
What it would do is this is very narrow ban on licensed practitioners, and so the boards that the legislature has oversight over, and so it basically a prohibition. So it would prohibit licensed practitioners from providing the conversion therapy efforts to change sexual orientation. So
to
that
minors.
To minors only, yes. So it's prohibited, and then the boards themselves would monitor it so that they would be deemed to be engaging in unprofessional conduct, and then they would be subject to disciplinary action by their board. So and we don't dictate the terms what the discipline should be, but we do deem it that it is prohibited and that it is something that needs to be regulated.
So as you're talking about what your proposal would do, the arguments in other states that have similar legislation, they've centered on California as one of them. Those arguments centered on violations of free speech and religious freedom. Those arguments failed in the high courts. So what about the debate that the state is infringing on parental rights? This is likely to come up.
Right. This is something, it's a practice that's been discredited. And there's 40 years of research. And so that was what was successful in California, was that the based on empirical evidence, and that there was a reasonable basis to bring to ban this type of therapy, and that was that there's evidence that it's causing harm to minors. So I know some of the types of therapies is all over the board, but some of it's really alarming and very harmful. And some of the universities have studied this, and so that's the type of research we would bring in. I mean, that's well established, and people that speak about it much more informed than I am, and how harmful it really is. What really brought this to my attention, and something that I thought was important, even though we're sort of stretched thin on the bullying, was that we have such high rates of among the LGBT youth, high rates of suicide, substance abuse, homelessness. And I think a lot of that stems from a difficulty that families experience when one of their children, it's usually a teenager, is having questions about their sexual orientation or wants to come out or does come out, and often that causes turmoil in the family, and they seek professional services, counseling to help them, and they're susceptible to these types of practices, especially if they may come from sort of Christian-based approach. So it is something that we're not infringing on somebody's belief or their family. We're just saying that the type of practice that's currently being engaged in by certain practitioners is harmful, and that needs to be stopped. So,
let's talk a little bit, excuse me, about the timing of this issue. You mentioned earlier this comes after the marriage amendment was passed, and we're looking at the anti-bullying bill, the Safe and Supportive Schools Act, coming into play in 2014. Have those issues kind of led the way for this? And do you feel optimistic this can pass because of those proposals?
I think so. I mean, because of the positions people took on the amendment, and then the votes on the marriage bill, and then going back to their home districts and hearing from people. And I think I think people were, many of the districts, they're progressive on social issues, and I think some people were surprised at how there wasn't all this a fallback or as a result of their vote. So, and those conversations, I mean, we had a lot of conversations amongst legislators in back rooms and individual conversations where people could really try to frame this issue and talk about their the concerns that their constituents have raised and what their personal beliefs were, and how you sort of reconcile all that, and really just coming down to looking at that this is about a social change, and about something that where it's something that the legislature I think was ready for, that change, or to recognize that change, and really the focus on discrimination. We have a history in the state of 20 years ago, a discrimination statute that included sexual orientation, and so I think that's the history that Minnesota's and legislators are proud of, that history. 2014,
it's supposed to be the unsession. Do you anticipate any pushback from members trying to pursue this issue in what was supposed to be, as I said, the unsession, although we do see other social issues springing up?
Well, it was my second term, so I'm not privy to all the conversations about how this is framed. I know we've gotten messages from leadership that it is, even though it is respectful of the governor's wishes, it's somehow, I think the way they're handling it, I mean, I'll leave it to them to how they're going to frame that. But really, I mean, there are issues, I think, that the governor is trying to promote that will be followed, but at the same time, and we have to do our job. So, and our constituents have, concerns that have been, put aside, or that are, and so we can't ignore that.
So is leadership supportive of you pursuing this in 2014?
I think there was Speaker Thiessen in change.org issued a statement, and it was, it was just something that recognizing that this was a problem and that it should be addressed, and that he needs to see the bill, but that he was generally supportive. So.
Okay, with those words, Representative Allen, thank you for joining us, and we will of course follow this legislation when you have a hearing on it. We appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.